Hey guys, Brock here. So today we're going to be reviewing the install for this. I know. It's the IronMan ATS Spec-C 2-inch lift kit for the 2024 Subaru Crosstrek Sport. Obviously it comes in a much larger box. This is just one of the spacer boxes. So you're gonna get two of these guys for the spacers, and then you're gonna get two front struts and two rear struts. Mine came in 4 different packages, so if you order, don't freak out. But I did want to go ahead and touch on a couple of points and review the actual kit in and of itself. Because if anything, I would say watch this before you start your install, because like most videos out there, they make it look a lot easier than it is. And I should clarify, this was not difficult. So when I say a lot easier, it was still relatively easy, but there are some key points which we're going to discuss that they made it just look too simple. So I will say right off the bat, the install video from IronMan is hands down probably one of the better ones that I've actually seen out there. I've been doing a lot of install videos lately. If you subscribe to the channel, you've seen a couple of them out. And the reason why that is because you'll sit there, you'll start to do your install, and it'll be like, oh, unbolt these 3 bolts. And then the next thing you know, you're putting everything back together 18 steps, you know, in between then and there. And IronMan's video was very thorough, and it had some tips and tricks in it as well. Most of them worked great. Some of them, which we're going to cover in a second here, required a little bit more intervention. I will say that if you're doing this, a couple things right off the bat. One, if you have the ability to borrow a second person with some weight, as in over 100 pounds, you're gonna want that. And you can install this completely on your own, but it is easier with a second set of hands. This is especially true after you've replaced the stock shock assembly and you're trying to fidget around with getting the new struts in or the lower control arms in. It definitely would have been much quicker and easier for me if I had a second person. And in fact, as we'll cover in a second, I needed to go ahead and utilize a second person. The other thing, and I'm really surprised because just about every kit, and I've installed a lot of things onto my Crosstrek and my Tacoma and other people's cars. But anytime that THREADLOCKER has been required, the company usually provides a little bottle. It's not expensive. IronMan didn't do that, and I'm not sure why. It is what it is. But before you start the install, you need red THREADLOCKER. You need this for the spacer kit on the back. So going through what I would say and recommend, but never follow myself, is go through the install video and the instructions prior to getting there and starting. I will say that the rear end is where the subframe spacers are installed, and that is the most difficult part of the install overall. And there's a couple things that I learned that I'm going to share with you guys so that you're aware of it. And in addition to that, you also are going to need a torque wrench. Go to Harbor Freight, get one on Amazon, but this is suspension stuff. And you know, if you forget a nut or a bolt or something along those lines, you can cause some serious damage to your vehicle, up to and including death of yourself or other people, because obviously your car depends heavily on the suspension. And if something goes awry, what is there? I mean, so spend the money. You're already saving it by potentially doing the install yourself. I've seen install prices online anywhere from about $500 to about $1,200. They seem to vary depending on where you live and the shops in the area. But if you're saving the money, just go spend the 40, 50, 60 bucks for a decent torque wrench. It's safety, peace of mind. You'll use it in the future as well. But go to Amazon, go to Harbor Freight, get yourself one, and you should be good to go. So those are kind of the key things that you're really going to need to know prior to getting into it. The other thing that I highly recommend, in fact, I would say it's pretty much a must, you really need a floor jack. It helps to have a rolling one. It can be your bottle jack or the one that came in your car. But when you do your subframe spacers, you need to put that up under the rear differential, undo or loosen the bolts, and then lower it so that you can go ahead and make some room for it. If you try to do that without a jack or some sort of support, the rear end's just going to drop and you're going to be having a bear of a time muscling it in. So just something to think of. So to recap, prior to you starting, get yourself red thread locker, get yourself a torque wrench, and have your floor jack available. If you have to use the one that came with your spare tire in your car, use that, because it's something better than nothing. And lastly, if you want to save yourself a bunch of frustration and time, just have a second set of hands and weight available for like 3 minutes. They don't need to sit there and do it with you the entire time. But definitely get those items before we get into it. And what we're gonna do now is place some of the pressure points that I went through, and then we're gonna go ahead, and I already have the stock measurements. I have my measurements after I added my 235, 65, 17-inch tires, which are equivalent to 29s. And then we have the measurement with the tires and the lift to see how much we actually gained in ride height. So one thing to remember is that a lot of people think that because they added a 2-inch lift kit, they're gonna get 2 inches of ground clearance. That's not always the case. That's not how ground clearance works. Ground clearance is increased when you put larger tires on to your vehicle so that it lifts it off the ground. What you're doing with this kit is raising the body off. Now, that being said, your rocker panels, your underneath, those have a lot more clearance, but true clearance is really going to come in the form of being able to run larger tires, getting a 2-inch lift kit, and elevating the body up a little bit higher so that you can fit those larger tires is where your true ground clearance comes in. So just want to touch on that real quick, but let's get into it. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that part sucked. Originally I told you to get a screwdriver, put it in the bottom, and then get yourself 2, actually. That's how much this thing sucks. So when you feed it in, the easiest one, you gotta be careful of this stupid frickin' brake line and the ABS sensor. So when you get it in, the first thing you're going to want to do, because the top hole is bigger, put your screwdriver through and then let it sit, and then grab your other one and work it, put it in there all the way through. Then back the top again and jiggle this around until you can get the upper big bolt in. So as a reminder, the very top bolt is the one that gets the washer. So we're going to put this washer on. We've got our nut right here, and we're gonna secure that right there. So we're good to go there. And then what we're gonna do next is we have our bottom bolt. Again, that's the skinnier one. We already removed, obviously, our screwdrivers. Can't put a screwdriver and a bolt in the same place at the same time. That's just not gonna happen. So what we're gonna do is grab this and then start playing around with there. So I pushed it in a little and it went in. There we go. Now the bottom one's in. So seriously, if you have an extra set of hands, get them. I wish I had a third one, but solution for me, 2 bigger screwdrivers. Put the top one in first and then leave it locked in there. Maneuver the bottom one so you can slide the other screwdriver all the way in, then back the first one out and put the bolt in. And then I employed a hammer because why not? So as it stands, we got this one finger tight. We're putting the bottom one on right now. And then what's left here is we have the top hat, the top part of the shock. So I'm still screwing this in. There we go. So we have the top part of this, and you're gonna have to make adjustments to the top, and you can do that if you reach up and in there. So what I would recommend that you do is you're gonna go up and down and up and down. So let's grab the video. Okay, so here's the upper part. Okay. So I'm gonna make adjustments to the inside, and then while I'm doing that, I'm gonna reach underneath, and you can rotate this top hat around just the top plate so that it'll align to the bolt pattern. There is not a lot of room to work with in there, no big deal. There we go, almost. You really just want to get your first bolt. There, so I got the first bolt. Now I can go ahead and play with rotating this. So the first bolt's in here. I rotated that plate. I can see the other ones are aligned. Now, here's the little trick. If you got a floor jack, so here's the nuts that we're gonna have to put on in a second. I'm just gonna put those right here. So again, those are 15mm socket is what you're gonna need, and tighten it to 24 foot-pounds. But let me show you guys this. And go back down here. So be careful with this. It's not that big of a deal, but if you slide your floor jack under there like that, and then start lifting up a little. Yep. Cool. Okay. So you guys have an idea. Let me go ahead and disconnect this. So this is what happened. Okay, here we go. So by using the jack, we were actually able to get these all the way through. We got our first nut on there. You can see the rest are ready and primed to go. Go ahead, tighten those down to 24 foot-pounds, and then we'll pick up from there. But if you have the ability, or you have a floor jack, or even a bottle jack, or an extra set of hands, lift up on this a little. It'll push them through after you've made your adjustments with the top hat so that the bolt pattern fits. And it just makes your world a lot easier. So I'm going to tighten these, and we'll come back for the next step. Okay, so since we're going to go ahead and switch this up and turn it into more of a review slash hotspot, I did want to go ahead and touch base. The front, super easy. We already covered really the kind of using the 2 screwdrivers if you're only one person. The rear is a different animal on this thing, and I wouldn't say it's difficult. I would say it's tedious. So a couple of hot spots. One, these frame spacers, they tell you to do back out, you know, one at a time, which I did. And I took that to mean, you know, back one out and put it in, tighten it up. And I did 1, 2, and then the other side 3, and then the front passenger was a bear. And nothing I could do would get it to line up. So I backed out, and then I actually started with that one and then came back around and then got stuck here. So definition of insanity is, you know, basically doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Here's what you need to do. Loosen all yours, and then back the bolts out one at a time. Put the new one in, thread it just a couple, and then wait, and then go to the next one, back the next one out, thread it just a little, wait. So just get the first couple of bites on these 4, and then tighten them all the way down. So when they say do it one at a time in the instructions, what they mean is, you know, loosen it, pull it out, put the puck, couple threads, do not tighten it at all, and then move to the next one, back it out, do the next one, do not tighten it, and just go all around. The next thing that you're gonna run into that, again, you know, they make it look easy, is this little one. And again, it's not difficult, but when you try to get a socket, this is in the way. This slides like that. So slide this out of the way, and then you can access the OEM factory, tighten it down. And I will say that using one of these with a swivel head made life way easier. And then once you get it on, you can just go ahead and slide it like this, and then use the IronMan nuts like they show you in the video. So just a couple hot spots there with the spacers. This guy that they have you do, this little 2-inch, no big deal. One thing that is not listed in the instructions, nor is it included, is thread locker. So we got some red thread locker. You're gonna need it for the spacer part. So we need to thread lock these guys, and then we needed to thread lock the countersunk. I went ahead and thread locked just a little bit on the new bolts for the subframe spacers. But before you begin, get yourself, you know, some of this, some thread locker, red, Loctite, this, whatever. This is just happened to be, I think somebody else included it. But those are your hot spots in the back on both sides. So good luck. If you follow that, I think you'll find it a little bit easier than I did. All right, guys, so real quick, when you're putting the new strut in, you're gonna be tempted, or at least I was, to go ahead and get these. Don't crank them all the way down. I left it a little loose so that there's some room, because in the video, sorry if you get motion sickness, in the video, they tell you to go ahead and undo the lower control arm from the inside bolt, which is really solid advice. However, you need a little bit of play. So if you tighten that up top and then come try to do this, all that's gonna happen is you're not gonna be able to muscle it in. So go back those off to like their minimum. You'll have a little bit of play. Get that in and then go tighten the top. So just FYI. It might be covered in the video, I'm not sure. But this is install review and hotspot. So this is a hotspot. I wrestled with this thing for about 10 minutes before pulling my head out of my rear end. So I snuck up on my Subaru dealership. Front hub there is at 30.5. To the door is 11 inches. And then to the rear is 30.25. And then on mine, after the lift and tires, to the rear is 35. To the mid is, oops, to the mid is 14.5, and to the top is 32 3/8. Okay, so there you go. We did the walkthrough with the measurements. A couple things to consider really quick. So you guys saw obviously some of the pain points, and they do exist. So it is what it is. It's the same way with every install. Like I said, the video that they produced for installation combined with the instructions, I was able to work through everything. It really would be helpful to have a little bit of weight in a second set of hands. So I did actually stop by Las Vegas Subaru and took some measurements of a completely stock 2024 Crosstrek Sport using the same method that I used for my own. So out of the gate, fresh on the lot, from ground to top of the fender is 30.5. And then from ground to mid rocker panel, which is right where the two doors meet, so the front door and the rear door meet along that seam, is 11 inches. And then the rear from ground to rear fender was 30.25. So those were your stock measurements. Now, a couple things to consider on this. I've done the research on IronMan, and one of the constant things that comes up is sagging over time. And that's not an IronMan problem. I mean, that's just your suspension as you go along is going to actually break in. And it's important that you select the correct suspension when you're setting this up. A lot of people do not think about that. They go through and they think 2 inches and then, oh, I'm not really doing anything, yay. And then a year or two later, they start to notice sag, and it's because when you're out on your trips, you're not accounting for your recovery gear, your ice chest, your kids, all of the crap that you take out with you when you go out trailing or camping or overlanding or any of that. That all comes into play, and you need to really consider that. And a lot of the complaints that I saw online were people complaining about the rear sag, and then they go through their story and dealing with IronMan customer service, and it turns out that they should have ordered the Spec-C, which is the heavy load version. I am already running a steel bumper with a 5,500-pound winch, and in the back, my subwoofer box with the subs alone is 120 pounds, plus I have a compressor, the amplifier, that, and then whatever, you know, guests I have with me or other stuff that I bring along. So, and that's a constant. So after reviewing everything about IronMan, noticing the sag, the fix was always, you should have gotten the Spec-C. So I didn't even play games. I went straight to the Spec-C because everybody that was complaining seemed to be operating with like the normal weight one instead of the heavier load. So if you're gonna run a steel bumper, a winch, a bunch of overlanding stuff and recovery gear, an ice chest, dog, the kids, and the kitchen sink, get the Spec-C, just don't play around. So that was the stock, and after, with just the tires, so prior to putting the lift on, I had already downgraded to a 17-inch rim instead of the 18 that comes with the Sport. And then I stepped up the tire size to 235, 65, 17. IronMan recommends largest tire size is 225, 65, 17. So I went actually just a little bit wider, which added a little bit of height for whatever reason. And I don't have any rubbing issues at all. And I'm able to run the Rock Block rally style mud flaps on there as well. Again, no issues. And actually with that tire size and the stock suspension, I still didn't have any rubbing. But it is important to note that when I read these next measurements off, that the front, even after adding the tires, which added about 3/4 of an inch of ride height, the front came in actually lower than stock. So prior to installing the lift at the front fender, ground to top of the fender, I came in at 30.25. So even adding that 0.75, when I added the steel bumper and the winch, because the weight is all the way at the end, it did lower it just a little bit. So we actually lost a little bit of height, even with the additional height added by the tires. The overall came down because of the weight. So I came in 30.25, so I lost 1/4 of an inch. I didn't measure the middle seam, I just didn't. And then the rear with the new tires came in at 31.5, which was overall versus stock about 1 1/4 inches over what's on the lot. So, and again, steel bumper, subwoofer, all that jazz. So that's what we were sitting at prior to the lift. I have since obviously installed the lift. I've gone out on 2 trails and put about 500 miles on the car, because when I first put the lift on, it was very tall. And I had negative camber, so the tires were kind of butterflying out a little. The rear was fine, but the front was kind of doing one of these numbers a little. And that showed when I was on the freeway driving. The car was incredibly stiff. The steering was extremely snappy to the point it actually worried me on a couple of things, because just the slightest little movement and I was, you know, next lane over. So I wanted to go ahead. I ran a couple of easy trails with washboards and something that was a little bit higher speed. I turned off traction control. I pitched the car left. I pitched the car right. Basically got some side-to-side motion, the washboard motion, just to help settle the springs in. I did 2 trails like that, and it made a world of difference. The car is much more responsive in steering compared to stock, but not as sensitive as it was when I first put the lift on. And then going over the road and everything, the suspension is definitely stiffer than stock. but it doesn't feel like I'm feeling every little single pothole like I was when I initially put it on. So if you put this on and then you're driving around and your first couple of rides, you're like, whoa, you know, it does calm down, it does settle down. And like I said, 500 miles, 2 trails, just to kind of break it in. I will continue to update this video to see if it continues to sag, because I know if you research IronMan ATS 2-inch lift, that is one of the things you're gonna come across. So in 30 days, we're gonna measure it, and in 60 days, we'll measure it again. Then we'll do it at the 3-month mark, all the way up to about the 6-month mark, and then we'll come back after a year and see if there's any sort of sag. I am adding a roof rack, as well as a recovery gear, so I do anticipate that coming down. I can already tell the difference in the ride quality, so I do know that the springs are breaking in, and I suspect they're going to come down as well. So stock height fresh off the lot was 30.5 in the front, and then 11 from the ground to the rails, and 30.25. After the lift and tires, and then adding weight via the subwoofer and the steel bumper and winch, I came up to 33.25 in the front. So we gained 2.75 over stock. My clearance at the rails, so where the 2 doors meet, is now sitting at 14.5. So definitely got an increased ride height out of that, to the tune of 3.5 inches right now. And the rear went from 30.25 to 34.5. So I actually gained 4.25 inches in the rear. I do, again, anticipate over time that it's gonna break in. My Tacoma with Icons did the same thing. When I first got it, it was extremely stiff. After a couple of trail rides and a couple of months and a couple thousand miles, it started to feel exactly like it should. So if you get this and you're like, whoa, crap, that was way more than I expected, you're not alone. Don't freak out. Over the course of time, putting some miles on, it's gonna settle and come in right where it should. But overall, very pleased with it. And then I've got some pictures and a video to show you guys to wrap this video up. If any of this helped you, please give a like. And by all means, please subscribe, because we have other channels out there, other videos out there that we produce that cover replacing your front speakers, your rear speakers, adding an amplifier to the stock system in and of itself. I did a tire flate, 4-tire inflate deflate review. So there's a lot of content. So please subscribe, check that out, especially if you got a 2024. I also cover the Highline, the Body Armor 4x4 Highline bumper install, which if you're getting one of those, definitely check that video out, because the instructions are for an 18 to 2023. It is different with the Gen 3 2024s that we have. The trims are different. So if you're considering it, go check that video out next. But for now, here you go.